Welcome to MedHeads, the weekly show that brings a biopsychosocial focus to issues of the day, along with special guests who will showcase their expertise and enthusiasm about their field of practice. Your host, Dr. Fergal Armstrong.
Hello, my name is Dr. Fergal Armstrong and welcome to this MedHeads series wherein we talk with Chrissie. By her own admission, Chrissie is a recovering alcoholic, and she has very bravely agreed to be filmed on camera and to tell us her story. Hello, Chrissie. How are you?
Good, thanks, Fergal. How are you?
I'm very well. So,
That's good.
Chrissie, right now you've said to me that you are a recovering alcoholic and that you are very active in a 12-step program.
Yes.
Give me a brief outline of what your life is like right now. What are the successes of your life right now? What are you doing with your life?
Wow. Okay. So right now I work full-time in the drug and alcohol sector. I am studying uni at night, so I'm studying a social science degree. I'm a wife. I'm a mum of three children, a 13-year-old and twin boys who are 11. So I spend a lot of time in the car racing around to activities after school, friends over, sleepovers, that sort of thing. I am, as you mentioned, active in a 12-step program, so that takes up a lot of time as well, outside of work. Yeah, and somewhere in there I try and fit some friendships and coffee in, so yeah.
So you are a success. You're a successful employee, you're a successful counselor, you're a successful wife, you're a successful mother. But you are also a recovering alcoholic. So let's go back to the very beginning. Where do you think it all started? Where do you think it all came from?
I think it all came from, and I've been over this a number of times in my head. I think it was two worlds colliding, really. I think I had a genetic predisposition to alcoholism, so a lot of alcoholism on the paternal side of my family, a lot of mental illness on the maternal side of my family, and even though I didn't grow up with my dad in the picture, I did grow up with a stepfather and there was a lot of family violence. So I suppose you would call that a traumatic experience over about 6 or 7 years. And then, we moved around a lot and just a very unstable upbringing.
Right. So there was a lot of instability. You were never sure of yourself. You were never grounded. So let's just unpick that a little bit. So your parents separated when you were at what age?
My parents separated when I was 2, and my mother remarried pretty quickly. Until I was about age 8 or 9, they broke up. But for that period of time, as I said, there was family violence, a whole lot of fighting. It wasn't unusual to hide in wardrobes and hide under beds, and with my sister, who was 15 months younger. Or we'd end up at some next door neighbour's place, seeking refuge, and we'd see police lights out the front and what have you. But so that went on for quite some time, and then they broke up, and my mum and my sister and I set about travelling.
Right. So tell me about your father. What was his story briefly?
Okay, so look, that's a good question. Dad came from, I guess, middle upper class family. He went to Scotch College in Melbourne. His sisters went to St Catherine's. So they went to good schools. They came from a good family. We just have alcoholism in our blood.
So he was an alcoholic.
He was an alcoholic. Yeah, he was, and
your mother,
a functioning alcoholic. Yeah. My mum, this is a slightly difficult question because mum's she's had issues. Let's say that she's had. Mum and I have spoken about this. I think she has an undiagnosed mental illness, and she's found it tough at times. Yeah. So Mum said about, she loved to move around. She was kind of always looking for the next best thing. The grass was always greener. We moved from state to state, town to town, region to region, school to school. And I remember saying to her at one stage, Mum, like, when you meet a man, like with a boyfriend, do we have to move in? Because, like, we'd moved in. By the time I met my husband in my mid-20s, I'd lived in 45 or 50 houses. So, it was, So there was just a lot of transient.
So can you remember growing up with your biological father?
No, I've got one memory of Dad.
Right.
Yeah.
So at the age of 3, your parents split up, and then your mother remarried, and then you grew up with your stepfather, who was then there was violence. You said, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How do you think it affected your mother?
It certainly wasn't a positive influence. Look, I'm sure it had an enormous effect. I'm sure it had a huge impact. And I'm sure it affected her ability to parent. My mum has got just some amazing things about her, and I love my mum to bits. She just made some really, really bad choices. And I don't say that in a punishing way or, in a way I'm not angry. We've been through all of this. I think, probably based on her upbringing as well. I mean, I don't know. I think my mum has got underlying trauma that, definitely played out in the way she lived her life.
How do you think it affected you and your sister, this violence, this instability?
It was obviously like a scary time, but for some reason, I don't fear, this is weird, like I don't actually fear violence. I'm not violent, thankfully. I'm not at all. But I don't, if I meet a person that, how do I explain this? I don't fear being punched, but my greatest fear is if you don't like me. So somewhere along the line, it affected my self-esteem more so than, my level of fear.
So growing up, did you feel normal? Did you feel like everybody else?
Not at all. I felt really different.
Yeah.
I felt really different. I felt like I didn't want people to know the truth about what happened at my home. I remember having a friend over one night and a massive tub chair being thrown through a huge window, and of course she was never allowed back around. So whatever happened at my home was a secret. We then went from being very wealthy in the community, and when my mum divorced, we had no money, which was, to most people okay, but it really affected my mum. And then the place where we lived was pretty horrible, so I was embarrassed to have people back. And, it affected, socially, I don't like to say standing, but just my position. I didn't know who I was, where I fit in. I went to really wonderful schools because my dad in Queensland, although I didn't know him, paid for a private school education, which I'm always, to this day really grateful for. But socially, I didn't fit that mould. I didn't fit in, and looking back, I can see that now. But I took that personally, like there's something wrong with me,
So do you think you were experiencing any mental health disorders yourself when you were growing up?
Yeah. I do. I had begun to self-harm. I don't know if I was 13. It was before the age of 14. And I had talked about suicide. I had talked about and actually tried to starve myself at times. In retrospect, it was definitely a cry out for help. I mean, if I'd wanted to get that right or to kill myself, I'm sure I would have done it. I really wanted someone to listen and I think I wanted someone to just fix me and make everything okay. I needed to feel different. I needed, not different to other people, but I needed to change the way that I felt. The way that I felt was really sad, was really insecure. I had no idea, to be honest, why I'd been put on this earth. I was trying to work out what's my purpose here? And life so far has been pretty sad and scary. I'm like, is this life? Is this, what it's supposed to be? Because if it is, I'm not sure how long I'm going to last,
So you lacked identity. You lacked purpose and you lacked joy.
Definitely. Definitely lacked joy.
So joy, purpose and identity, they were missing from your life.
They were.
And then you discovered alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us about that.
I did. And so I was 14 when I had my first drink at my cousin's place in Queensland or Brisbane. And it was a party. We were out the back and I got a 375ml of Bundaberg rum. And I remember my friend saying, you've got to mix that with Coca-Cola. And I said, no, I've never had this. I don't know exactly what's going to happen, but I know I don't want it watered down. I want the full effect of whatever this is supposed to be. I don't remember what their reaction was, but I do remember having that feeling, and I also remember it burning the heck out of my throat, but I didn't care. I drank that 375 in I don't know how long. It wouldn't have been too long. I think I remember seeing my Doc Martens and then probably face planted into the ground and that was it. And I blacked out. And from my very first drink, I was a blackout drinker, and I didn't, I actually didn't know that, I mean, I knew that I'd drunk a bit, but I didn't know that, I thought everyone blacked out. I literally thought after one drink, no one can remember what goes on. But yeah, I woke up the next day and I thought, gee, I wonder when I can do that again.
What did it give you?
Hope.
Why did you want?
It gave me hope.
Gave you hope. Why?
It gave me hope.
Why did it give you hope?
Because it gave me relief, and because innately I knew actually that I didn't want to die, although I carried on about that. Innately I knew there must be another way to living, and I'd found the easier, softer way. It's better than self-harming. It's better than talking about suicide. I can actually drink. Find that joy that you spoke of, and maybe I can get through life. Like maybe I can actually, and it really did give me hope, because I thought, well, I think, I've found my way, and so I began.
It numbed your pain.
Absolutely, it numbed my pain, but it also made me feel normal. I didn't necessarily drink to fit in, because I didn't fit in. I knew I didn't really drink like others, but I did drink to feel normal. I did drink to try and experience what other people looked like they were experiencing, which was fun, and and that for some time I did have. It's just that I could never set a limit. I'd always go beyond what my limit was, and physically I just couldn't manage.
Did alcohol give you the tribe that you craved? Did it give you social connection that you didn't have before?
Yeah, I suppose it did. It gave me an identity as the big drinker. As much as that's not really. I didn't wake up and want to be famous for that, or it gave me a place, I suppose, amongst my peers in a social group. The sorts of people that were drawn to me and that I was drawn to tended to be misfits of some description, and we liked that. We were sort of misfits, and I suppose somehow I thought that was kind of cool, but I wasn't really able to establish deep and effective relationships. They were very superficial, so if you weren't going to come and drink with me, or vice versa, like, we had nothing in common. I'm not right. Meeting you for a coffee.
Yeah, but there was a point of communion, wasn't there? And that was the alcohol.
There was, absolutely. And so it took me out of isolation, and ironically left me in isolation 20 years later. But
when did you notice, or what were the harms that you noticed that you began to start experiencing?
At that age?
No. Let's go forward a little bit. So you now established yourself as a drinker. It's given you an identity. It's given you a circle of acquaintances, if not friends.
Yes.
It's taken away the pain. You feel a little bit normal. That's the upside. When did you start experiencing the downside, and what was that downside?
The downsides began probably, late teens, early 20s. I began to have accidents. I fell over and broke my nose at one stage, which was not a pleasant experience. And yeah, woke up in hospital having my nose re-broken and ordinary. I woke up in many hospitals actually. I was once told that I was scraped off like a 3 or 4 lane highway. So I don't know what I was doing on that highway. They said that there were no cuts and grazes, so we could only deduce that maybe I'd done that on purpose. So these are the sorts of things. I wasn't able to guarantee my behaviour. What other things? I lost my license. I lost it for 15 months, but I didn't get it back for about 4 or 5 years because I didn't bother. Like once I just started, I thought, well, obviously I started catching rides or getting taxis or public transport, and somewhere along the line I thought, well, why I'm drinking so much, I actually shouldn't have a license anyway. And it took me years and years to get it back. Like I had to have lessons again just to get my license back. I'd forgotten how to drive. I began to lose some friendships. I began to, I'm just trying to think if I've actually lost a job directly. Not really. I took a lot of sick time off different jobs, but I haven't actually lost a job directly. But yeah, I certainly wasn't promoted. Yeah.
So the costs to you were physical health and risk, because we've described your experiences in hospital. You say you've lost friendships.
Yeah.
At what point did you hit rock bottom? What was the time when you felt, oh, enough's enough, I've got to do something about this?
Okay, so when I hit rock bottom, basically, oh gosh, I hit a number of rock bottoms, but the real rock bottom happened quite a bit later in my early 30s, when I had wanted, to get married, to have a career, to have a house, and to have children. And if I have all of those things, then I'm fine in life, then I'm sorted. And my drinking will no doubt get better, because once I've got those things that are going to fill me up and fill that void, then I'll be okay, and my drinking will sort itself out, and I'll mature and whatever. I hit rock bottom when I had all of those things and my drinking was worse than ever. And in fact, it was scary. I was closer to death than I'd ever been. And yet I had all of this stuff to lose now. So I thought, gee, all the things that I thought were going to fix me, they're in front of me and they haven't fixed me. I've got worse. And that was really frightening. So that was my rock bottom, not being able to stop when I had every reason in the world to stop.
So what did you do then?
So evidently I must have called around a whole heap of rehabs one night, because I don't recall, but they started calling back the next day, and I'm thinking, who are you? And anyway, the first one that called back was one that's not too far from where I am, and I sort of called it a bit of a God job, because it was one that was run by peers and it had a really strong 12-step focus. So they called back, and she asked me how much I drank. I said between 1 and 2 bottles a day, which was actually half of what I drank. And she said, gee, darling, you'll need to come in here, you'll need to detox, what have you. And I remember thinking, God, if she's saying that on half of what I'm actually drinking, like I really need to be at this place. I mean, I expected to hear, oh no, you're not actually that bad just yet. So, and this woman sounded worried for me. I was like, is it, maybe it is bad. Yeah.
So you went into detox?
Yes.
And
so I went into detox and actually a 28-day program. So I guess, the first initial stage would have been considered detox, and then some stabilization after that.
And what would you say about the experience?
It was amazing. The very first thing I realized was, number one, that I wasn't alone, which is, I can't put words on how much of a relief that was. There were other women there, because I thought I'd be the only female or alcoholic. There were other parents there. They were nice people. They weren't let's face it, scum of the earth that I thought alcoholics would be. It wasn't the man, on the park bench with the paper bag, as we always hear. And to me, that's what an alcoholic was. I mean, I've come from a family where people die from alcoholism. So, to me, you don't recover. You just manage a disease or an illness. And, suddenly there's people around who are good people and they're getting well. And it gave me a huge amount of hope.
Right. So you went through your detox, and then what did you do? What was the next step for you in your recovery?
So then, I stayed for the 28 days. I became, physically well, mentally somewhat more well, emotionally a bit more balanced, and I came out and I began, I got into a 12-step program basically, and so began to look at recovery outside of a rehabilitation centre, and that's what I did.
So you went to the 12-step program after your detox, and how many days did you attend that program?
Once I came out of the facility, so I attended 90 meetings in 90 days. Probably a bit more than that initially.
Right.
And yeah.
And then what happened? 90 after 90 and 90, and then what happened?
Then it just got a bit boring, Fergal. then I was just looking. I was looking for the colours back in my life, and I began to fantasize about all the good times, and I began to tell myself that I was missing out on all this fun, forgetting about the hospitals and the the train wreck that was reality. I didn't look at any of those things, and I began to feel sorry for myself. I began to feel lonely, left out.
So you felt as if you were in control, you were cured, and then...
Exactly. I felt that I'd ticked all the boxes, that I'd done everything that had been asked of me, that I had recovered physically. I had all the blood tests, my liver was okay now, and everything was back on track. Nothing was inflamed, and the peripheral neuritis that had started in my hands and feet I didn't have that anymore. Like, there was no pins and needles, there were no numb patches, and physically I began to feel really well. And you know what? I think I just forgot. I forgot that that I'm an alcoholic, and that alcoholics like me really shouldn't have that first drink.
Right. So then you needed a second rock bottom, didn't you, to actually realize, whoops, I've got to do something about that. What happened then?
Yeah. You mean the second rock bottom, or?
Yeah, the second rock bottom.
There was a period. So I ended up relapsing at about 4 months. I had about 4 months recovery, and it was, for the most part, it was wonderful. It just got difficult towards the end, and it became really difficult to manage, my thinking, because I hadn't really changed my thinking or my behaviours. Like, I'd taken myself away from alcohol, but I hadn't replaced it with a solution as such. I just listened to a whole lot of stuff, and I hadn't actually done anything. So it began to become really uncomfortable, and my natural state of being discontent and feeling fearful and anxious and sad, and everything began to kind of weigh my shoulders down, and eventually I thought, I need relief, and I looked for relief, and I found it, where I knew I'd find it, where it had always been waiting. And so I got temporary relief, and that sort of continued on and off for 6 months until I really hit my proper rock bottom, which on the surface was actually not as bad as the rock bottom prior to going into treatment. It's just that it wasn't a surface rock bottom. It was this really internal understanding and acceptance. Yeah.
Right. And so your last drink was when?
So my last drink was the 19th of November, 2011.
How many years ago
that was 9 years ago, just coming up to 9 years, and almost coming up to 10 years since I went into treatment. So it's been a ride.
So what I'm hearing is that actually you needed multiple opportunities to actually engage with the treatment that you ultimately needed to get recovery. It wasn't a I'm sick, I need help, therefore I'm going to get cured, and therefore I'm fine. You didn't have a one-off return to normality for you. It was a series of bumps along the road.
It was, yeah. It certainly.
Yeah.
I just basically say it wasn't a hole in one. It was it was a whole lot of small experiences that I guess molded into one and became my recovery. And recovery is so individual for people. In terms of what helps me an enormous amount, obviously being a 12-step program, that's not so. To me, that's not, I mean, that is individual, but to me, that is one of the big, answers. But it also helps enormously to have counselling. I obviously needed that intervention from doctors, from hospitals. The doctors saved my life, and a 12-step program prolongs my life,
Right. So let's go back to the concept of identity, because you mentioned at the first part of your story that alcohol gave you identity. Now it's abstinence from alcohol that gives you that same identity and also that purpose within this 12-step program, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you asked me about all the things that I am today, and although it was hard to hear you say you're successful at this, or because I don't know, I don't see that. I just see a really ordinary life today that is remarkable to me because it's so ordinary. Like if I pick my children up from school, I am almost crying inside with joy, that's a big deal for me, whereas everyone else is oh God, here we go. It's those ordinary things that just mean so much. So, but yeah, I found that joy that you were talking about that was lacking, and it's not a one-stop shop, though. I don't know exactly where I found it. It just happened along the way.
And the other thing that 12-step has given you is given you a tribe, a community.
Yeah,
you
absolutely.
can't do this on your own. And
no.
I think that's one of the messages that we have to highlight, is that for people who are going through alcohol use disorder, alcohol dependency, you cannot do it on your own. What would you say to that?
I mean, you've hit the nail on the head. I tried to for 20 years, and a stigma stopped me from saying something for a long time. Fear of, I knew deep down that if I say something, a doctor will tell me not to drink again, and that's exactly what happened. But so that I was fearful of that. But I've met this whole community of people who have gone before me, and some who have come after me. Everybody is so understanding. We just know exactly how the newcomer feels, and we give away what was freely given to us. So it's just this chain of knowledge and of, it sounds silly, but just love and care and compassion for someone who's really unwell. And, nowhere else in the world did I feel quite so as accepted as a 12-step program, because they accepted me for who I was at that time, and I wasn't that likable back then,
So, Chrissie, I'm really looking forward to hearing your story in sections, and each section that we're going to do, we're going to break down and go into a little bit of depth. So I really think that you're very brave, and I think you're a success, and I'm very grateful for the fact that you've agreed to share your story in more detail in the following series. Thank you so much, Chrissie, for giving us your story. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
See you soon. My name's Dr. Fergal Armstrong. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next episode.